Nancy Pelosi is visiting Taiwan diplomatically, and that is a really dangerous thing to do. China said that they would retaliate. It's truly a bad idea for her to visit. At least that's what I keep hearing. You see, people are acting like this is something new. That China said this was the last red line. We cannot cross it this time or they will invade Taiwan. Guys, they say this all the time. China is constantly threatening the US and Taiwan with the fact that if anything is done to protect Taiwan, then it's basically World War III. In my 10 years living in China, the Chinese government has made threat after threat after threat to take back Taiwan and to retaliate against the USA for ever helping Taiwan in any way, shape, or form. The threats definitely ramped up with Xi Jinping as well. And yet, the US sells Taiwan weapons, regularly does drills in the area, and so far, China hasn't done anything. Alas, here we are. Taiwan is intact, and the Chinese government is still furious and red in the face, and yet no invasion has happened. But a lot of people might tell you that that's all about to change. You see, the Chinese government is in fact a massive threat to the world. But here's the deal. I'm not here to placate your worries or act like this isn't a big deal. It really is. Nancy Pelosi going to visit Taiwan is in fact a very big deal. It's a massive deal. And despite that, I think that Nancy Pelosi should visit Taiwan.
已经多次表明坚决反对佩洛西众议长访台的严正立场。如果美方一意孤行，挑战中方底线，必将遭到坚决反制。由此引起的一切后果，完全由美方承担。
Yes, you heard that right. We should be making it clear to Beijing that they don't get to decide the fate of 24 million Taiwanese people, much less decide the fate of the entire future of global security. I want to give you some context as to why capitulating to the Chinese government can have the opposite effect that both Taiwan and the rest of the free world might want. When I used to live in China, I used to use a VPN all the time, and that's just because I had to. Everything's blocked in China. But the thing is, even here in the US, I use a VPN as well. Because what a VPN does is it takes your internet traffic, wraps it up into a secure key that nobody can see what you're doing online. And that's important because you're gonna wanna protect your identity. You don't want people seeing your credit card information. You don't want people getting your personal details. And you absolutely don't want your entire life out there for the entire world to see. My favorite VPN to use is NordVPN. NordVPN is a fantastically easy VPN to use. One click and you're protected. All kinds of amazing features to keep out hackers, people that want to steal your information, and there's even a double VPN feature just for that extra layer of security. If you go to nordvpn.com/Laowinner, not only are you gonna get a massive discount off of a 2-year plan, but you're also gonna get the free anti-malware feature, which gives you some extra security. And not only that, it's completely risk-free. So if you feel like it's not for you, you can get your money back. It's not only that though. When you go down in the description, you click on that link, nordvpn.com/Laowinner, you also help out the channel. So thanks. Here's the deal. First, I'd like to pose the argument that China will try and invade Taiwan eventually, but not in the immediate future like everyone keeps claiming. A lot of comparisons are made to Russia and what they've done in Ukraine, and yes, it is very, very hard to predict the actions of a crazy dictator like Xi Jinping. But I will say I don't think it's going to happen just yet. However, we, as the world, need to be ready for that inevitability because it will probably happen in the future. But we must not roll over every single time that Beijing makes a threat. Because so far, they've proven that they're not willing nor capable just yet. And buying into their threat propaganda only emboldens the regime to have way more sway in negotiations and gives legitimacy to a government that has proven to place almost zero value on human life. Why are we doing that still? My first argument is that this isn't new. China's threats come hard, fast, and all the time. If you pay attention to Chinese language media, taking back Taiwan is almost a daily topic, and it's been like that through all of history. In fact, China's been doing this since 1949, when the Communist Party of China won the Civil War. Just in case you don't know, I'll give you a super quick recap. China had a civil war back in 1927 until 1949, and there were two parties at war. It was the Nationalists, or the KMT, and the Communists, the CCP. The KMT basically had to fight the Japanese invaders as well as the CCP at the same time, and that inevitably sent the KMT into retreat, where they fled to Taiwan, and they set up shop there. After a while, Taiwan became an independent democracy and developed completely outside of Chinese Communist Party rule. Yet, the Chinese government, since 1949, has claimed that Taiwan is not only their territory, but everyone in Taiwan is Chinese and should be under Communist Party rule. But let me tell you something that a lot of people don't know. You might think, oh, the KMT lost the Civil War, so of course it should be the CCP's territory. But that's simply not the case, because guess what? Taiwan was never ever part of Chinese territory under the Communist Party of China to begin with. The Chinese government, the CCP, has never once, not even for a minute, not even for a second, ever ruled Taiwan. It didn't rule Taiwan back when it took over in 1949, and it doesn't rule it now. Taiwan is an independent democracy with a freedom index 10 times higher than China. That's right, 10 times higher than China. It is wealthier, freer, cleaner, happier, and it's more internationally minded. It's got its own independent judiciary, currency, passport. And get this, Taiwan doesn't want to be part of China. That's probably the most important part, is that if you ask Taiwanese people, they want nothing to do with China. So to put it mildly, if I had 50 cents for every time that I heard China threaten Taiwan, or even better, if I had 50 cents for every time China threatens the US over the Taiwan issue, let me just say I'd be chilling at a sweet ass beach house in Taiwan, because China still hasn't made good on their promises of invading Taiwan. Guess what? That's a good thing. Now, military intelligence in many countries around the world have been warning that China is an increasing threat. And it is. I am not downplaying that at all. I think the Chinese government poses the greatest threat that mankind has ever seen in modern days. The Chinese government poses such a threat that it threatens all of global security, of the likes that we haven't seen since the Soviet Union. However, there's a big mistake made every time that we back off when China makes a threat. Because when China makes empty threats, it shows global organizations like the WTO or the WHO, think about the blunder made there, and the UN, and many more, that China needs to be dealt with kids' gloves, and then in turn, it lets China get its way. Either China is too important to ignore, or China is too dangerous not to make concessions with. I keep hearing it. It's a big problem with many media outlets as well. Fear-mongering and doom clickbaiting people to get people to think that if the Chinese government doesn't get its way, then the whole world is over, just because of their sheer power that they've amassed. It's really a vicious cycle, and Beijing is the only clear winner in the controversy. It doesn't matter if people in media are opposing the Chinese government, because in the end, they give the Chinese government what they want, and that is power through fear. China's fragile leadership and reputation hinges on the rest of the world being scared of it, so that nothing is done to stop its rise in power. You see how this works? Feeding this absolute monster that the Chinese government under Xi Jinping has become has led it into a position where it can actually throw its weight around in the world and becomes the dominant power in getting people and governments to capitulate to it. Do you see this a little more clearly now? The Band-Aid has to be ripped off at some point. My second argument is that because the Chinese government under Xi Jinping is such a massive threat, We, in the free world, cannot allow them to even take minor victories. The FBI and MI5 said themselves that China, under Xi Jinping, is absolutely a threat to the world. Yes, the world, including the USA, is very much tied together to the Chinese economy. And there's nothing wrong with that. I should say, there was nothing wrong with that when China was showing signs of liberalization and forward momentum. But Xi Jinping has shown that China is capable of massive regression in human rights and honoring international agreements in general. And despite this very important trade relationship we have in the developed world with China, it's definitely time to rip off the Band-Aid. Make no mistake, until the Chinese government under Xi Jinping starts behaving like a human, no capitulation can be made. That's how we got here in the first place. Greed and convenience of low-cost goods from Amazon or wherever you want to buy them does not make up for how we are seeing China behave. An expansionist, neo-imperialist power that will not stop at harming and restricting its own citizens, but will also not stop at simply exhausting the world of its resources until there's nothing left. Whether it be in Africa, rare earth minerals, or fish, the Chinese government takes all. It's pretty cut and dry what the Chinese government's ambitions are. To close off to the world while simultaneously leveraging global organizations to play in its favor. Let's not dance around this anymore. Every single time we make concessions for the Chinese government, they find loopholes, create diversion, and continue to break every single promise they make. Whether it's acting like the savior of the world when it comes to carbon emissions and green technology, pointing the blame at the rest of the world, all while it adds coal plants and increases CO2 emissions and emits more CO2 than all developed countries combined, or claiming to be the champion of human rights, leading its citizens out of poverty when in fact it is the very same government that put the people in poverty in the first place, and then went on to carry out a genocide in Western China, which is still happening today. No, the real mistake is letting the Chinese government under Xi Jinping even have a voice to begin with. Because fueling megalomaniacs and bending to their whims hasn't worked out very well for the world in the past, has it? And it's certainly not going to work out better in the future. Taiwan and the Taiwanese people deserve protection, and the people of the world deserve a better future.